Not yet. Go.
Hello, ladies and welcome back to Pistons Nation. Today, Anthony Cardamone. Anthony, how are you?
I'm good, Aaron. I'm excited to start this show.
Yeah, we've been working to get this set up now for a while. Technical difficulties, but we got it. We're coming out good. So, Anthony, free agency has started, and I feel like I'm going to speak for most Pistons fans when I say this. After day one, the Pistons made no moves, and we were all watching player after player go down and target after target disappear. But SVG, Stan Van Gundy, the president of basketball operations, as well as the head coach for the Pistons, made a move. And it was a trade. His 5th trade ever as a Pistons head coach. He's making more trades than Joe Dumars ever has. Anthony, the Pistons traded a 2020 second round pick to the Phoenix Suns for Marcus Morris, Danny Granger, and Reggie Bullock. What are your thoughts on that trade?
It's a fantastic trade. We gave up basically nothing. It was almost a free trade. We're not going to need the second round pick in 2020. Not going to make a big impact. And we got a starter, a solid backup who might make the roster, not sure yet. And then a guy who is going to tear up the D League and we can call on when needed, and Reggie Bullock. So I really like this trade. Marcus Morris should be a very good player in Stan Van Gundy's system. Danny Granger can be a good mentor to Stanley Johnson and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I really like this trade a lot.
I do too, Anthony. And it just adds the depth that we've really needed at the small forward position, because I feel like all 3 of those guys can come in and play at that wing position. Now, I do agree that Reggie Bullock isn't going to be on the final roster, and likely Danny Granger or Cartier Martin will be released due to roster spots. I think Cartier Martin should be released personally, because Danny Granger used to be a fantastic player in Indiana. That's where his career started, and that's where he took off. He's struggled. He's bounced around ever since getting traded from Indiana. But Cartier Martin hasn't shown me I should take this guy over a guy that used to be an all-star caliber player. Anthony, what are your thoughts on that? Should we keep Cartier Martin, or should we keep Danny Granger?
Oh, it's a must that we keep Danny Granger instead of Cartier Martin. Cartier Martin is not a very solid player. He didn't play a whole lot last year. Didn't provide a big impact. And Danny Granger was once a very solid player. I believe an all-star, former 22-point scorer. And he's not that player anymore, but he still can provide 8 to 10 points and good shooting off the bench while having that veteran presence and can mentor our young guys. I think it would be a very stupid decision to cut Granger instead of Cartier Martin or Quincy Miller or someone like that.
Yeah, and Anthony, I'm going to give you some statistics on Danny Granger. He averaged in 2008 26 points a game. And then in 2009-2010 season, he averaged 24. And in 2010-2011, he averaged 20 points. So this guy can score. He's had 3 seasons where he scored 20 points or more per game, and a total of 5 seasons where he scored in double digits. Now, the red card with Granger is obviously his health. Last season, he only played about 42 games, and the season before that, no, actually, I'm wrong on that. Last season, he played 30 games, and then the year before that, he bounced around with 2 different teams, and in total only played 41. So this guy does have some injury issues with his legs holding up, which is a problem. But he won't have to play every night for the Pistons. And when he does play, it's not like he's going to be playing 20 minutes a game. So I think he's definitely worth the keep just because you look at his resume compared to Cartier Martin, and it's not even comparable. I never really liked the Cartier Martin signing. I never really thought it was a valuable signing. It wasn't never going to be a fruitful signing. But I like the move to get Granger because it's a veteran presence, and I know you've said this, and I tend to agree, is Danny Granger can be just like Caron Butler was for us last year.
And Chauncey Billups as well.
Right. He doesn't have to be, he's going to start for us and he's going to score 20 points. He's going to come in, hopefully he'll get around 10 to 15 minutes a game, and he'll just contribute in every way possible. And he'll be a mentor to the number 8 pick in the draft, Stanley Johnson. Now, let's transition into our next topic. DeMar Carroll signed a 4-year, $60 million deal with the Toronto Raptors. He was a free agent target for the Detroit Pistons. Danny Green signed back with the San Antonio Spurs on a 4-year, $45 million contract. Now, the last potential target left on the board is Tobias Harris. And it doesn't look like Detroit is going to sign him. But, Anthony, what are your thoughts on him, and do you think we should sign him?
No, I absolutely do not think we should sign him. He reminds me a lot of Josh Smith, who was a very disappointing player for the Pistons, to put it that way. He's an inconsistent three-point shooter. He's 2 seasons removed from shooting 25% from three. If you remember, Josh Smith was, I believe, 24%. So that's something to be concerned about. He's not a great defender. He always needs the ball in his hands. Not a good spot shooter. Just doesn't fit the system like those other guys did and the guys we just acquired. Doesn't fit the system. He's going to want too much money. And Orlando, since they missed out on Paul Millsap, they're likely going to match any offer. So it would just be a waste of time, and it would just be a very poor signing.
I definitely agree with that, Anthony. He's 22 years old, has said he wants the max contract, and his stats are what I like to call empty stats. He played on one of the worst teams in the league with the Orlando Magic. And in all honesty, when I watched him play against the Pistons, I didn't like his game. He doesn't play defense well. He gets very lazy at times. As you said, he doesn't shoot the ball well from three, and that's going to be a problem stretching the floor. And what we really need, as Stan Van Gundy has tried to get shooters, Tobias Harris isn't one of those guys. So I think he's definitely the guy we stay away from and stick with the group of wings we have right now, because Detroit, we love Detroit and we love the Pistons, but they aren't going to make it to the NBA Finals next season. So what's the point of signing a guy that may or may not work, taking that big risk, when we have Stanley Johnson in our back pockets developing? So I'm fine with Detroit not signing Tobias Harris. Now let's transition to Danny Green. Now we were I believe we were the first team to meet with Danny Green, and it was reported that Green was most likely always going to go back to San Antonio. Anthony, did you think the Pistons had a legitimate chance at Green, and do you think it was maybe either just Green's love for San Antonio, or do you think it might have been Detroit wasn't offering enough money?
I'm sure the Pistons offered enough money. If they're going to throw $14 million at DeMar Carroll, then they're going to throw that much at Danny Green as well. I just think it was a matter of San Antonio just being in a much better position to win. They're a much better organization right now, much more successful, and he's won a championship being a key player on that roster. He was one of their best players last season, and They almost made a deep run in the playoffs, and they definitely can this year, especially if they get LaMarcus Aldridge. So I think that team is really dangerous, and it was hard to see him leaving. I'm sure Detroit did have like a good chance to get him. He did have a meeting set up with them as we reported on our website. So I think the Pistons did have a chance. It was just a matter of the Spurs just being that much better of a situation than we are.
Right. And Danny Green is he really found himself in San Antonio. Greg Popovich, the coach of the Spurs, gave Green that chance, and that's Green took that chance, and his NBA career took off, and now he's getting paid $45 million. So I think there's definitely that love for San Antonio that made him want to go back there. I personally wanted Danny Green over DeMar Carroll and Tobias Harris because I've watched Danny Green and I've seen him go off at times, against the Miami Heat back in the finals a couple of years ago. He had 20-point games, and he spreads the floor, plays defense, and a lot of people didn't think we should sign him because he's not a registered small forward. But statistics showed that in minutes, Green's defensive and offensive stats look basically the same as it was when he played the shooting guard position.
Right. He's only 6'6", 215, I believe, 210, around that. So he doesn't have ideal size for small forward, but it could work. He played small forward for San Antonio. He'd be at a disadvantage against bigger players, but he can still defend at a high level. So I don't understand how fans, said don't sign him. He's a shooting guard when he can produce a small forward, and he has.
Right. And, that's kind of where you question some people's minds times. We've seen some crazy tweets. I've been looking at Vincent Ellis of the Detroit Free
Oh,
Press.
I feel so bad for that guy.
Crazy tweets, man.
Yeah.
Some people, you just gotta think about what you're saying sometimes.
Yeah. Some really bad opinions from Pistons fans. It's actually sad at times.
All right, now let's go into DeMar Carroll. And it was reported DeMar Carroll signed with the Raptors for 4 years, $60 million. And it was also reported, I believe this was from Mark Stein, I'm not exactly sure on that though, that Detroit offered $14 million for 4 years, but Toronto offered 4 years for $15 million. So DeMar Carroll took the extra $4 million total and took his talents down to Canada. So Anthony, we do have Stanley Johnson, and my thought on DeMar Carroll getting 4 years, $60 million is that, look, in 2 years, Stanley Johnson's going to be ready to start in the NBA. Why do we want to pay a guy $15 million to come off our bench? And is he even going to want to do that? So I think that in the end, we're going to be okay with not wasting $15 million in cap space for a guy that's eventually going to be coming off our bench. Anthony, what are your thoughts on this DeMar Carroll news?
I really like DeMar Carroll. I think he would have been a perfect fit in our system, but I think we would have offered him a 2-year, $35 million contract. I think 2 or 3 years would have been the better option than 4 years. And I think the Pistons should have signed him. That's my opinion. I really like DeMar Carroll. A lot of people disagree on that, but he's a guy who he only averaged 12 points, but you don't really need to give him the ball and ask him to create a lot of offense. He's mostly a shooter on the offensive end, but the defensive end is where he brings all of his value. Pistons were very bad on defense last year. They're getting better, but still struggling. Perimeter defense at small forward is one of our weakness. Kyle Singler, when he was with us, couldn't defend. Tayshaun is too old to defend now. Caron Butler couldn't defend. So perimeter defense at small forward was a problem, and I think they really should have addressed that by picking up DeMar Carroll, but if he wants 4 years, $60 million, that might not have been what Stan wanted to give him, and I don't blame him for that. That might be a little too much for him. Think if we could have got him for, 2 years, 28 million, 30 million, around that would have been a better deal to take, and I think maybe he would have made that deal. I'm not sure, but I think they should have got DeMar Carroll, but it all worked out with this trade.
And I agree. I really like DeMar Carroll, and Detroit could have really used someone of his abilities. His nickname fits him perfectly, Junkyard Dog. He's not a sexy player. He's gonna go out there. He's gonna do the dirty work. He's gonna play defense, and maybe he'll knock down a couple threes for you. But he's not a 20-point a night guy. He's not gonna get you, 15 and 5. He's gonna get you about 12 to 14 and two steals and maybe a block. And maybe that's what Detroit really needs. I definitely think that. I think we're gonna get enough scoring out of Reggie Jackson, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, and Andre Drummond. I didn't think we were gonna need a guy that's gonna score 20 points a game. I think we needed more of a defender, a perimeter defender, and that's where I really like the trade. So I think Marcus Morris is a solid player. I did not watch him much in Phoenix, but I watched some stuff yesterday. I watched some tape on him, and I tend to like his game. He's not a 45% 3-point shooter, but not many guys are. He shoots about 36% from the 3-point line. He's small forward, power forward, tweener. And this guy's going to get you double digits tonight. And he's going to get you maybe a steal, a block, and some rebounds. So, Anthony, my final question regarding the small forward position is, why did we trade for a small forward instead of signing a small forward?
Well, if you look at it now, with Danny Green gone, DeMar Carroll gone, and Tobias not fitting, there aren't really any solid small forward options. I wrote yesterday on PistonsNation.net, Pistons' best remaining option, small forward. But besides Tobias, none of those guys are really starters. So they aren't going to be a starting small forward for us. Maybe Corey Brewer, but he can't shoot. So I think that Marcus Morris is a better player than anyone we could have picked up in free agency. So he's a better player than we could have picked up in free agency. And, again, there's just not a lot of good options in free agency left, and making a trade was probably the best option, and it sure looks that way, and it all worked out great.
Right, and I prefer Marcus Morris out of anyone in the free agency class besides DeMar Carroll and Danny Green. And I think he's going to end up producing pretty well for us. I think he's going to fit into the system. And I'm excited to see what Danny Granger is going to do. I have always liked Danny Granger, and he's going to be a great veteran for Detroit if we keep him, which is a must. I'm going to be very upset if we drop Danny Granger and keep Cartier Martin, just because that seems like such a mistake. But that's being talked about a lot, and I'm definitely worried about that. But we need to stick with Danny Granger. I mean, this guy's a veteran, and as I've said, he can score. All right, so it is only day 3 of free agency, but Detroit's roster is pretty much full. The last guy we have to re-sign is Reggie Jackson, and Anthony, I assume that this is going to happen. So I'm going to ask you 2 things. One, are we going to re-sign Reggie Jackson, and for how much? I'm actually going to make this a 3rd question. And then, is there any more moves for the Pistons in free agency?
Yeah, they are going to re-sign Reggie Jackson. It's pretty much a done deal right now because he's with the summer league team. Not going to play, but he's practicing with them. He's going to be with the team. So, and teams aren't going to offer him. He's restricted. Pistons would match any offer anyways. So he is going to be a Piston again next season. It's just a matter of when we're going to sign the contract. We can go over our cap room to re-sign him. So it's definitely going to happen. It's just a matter of when and how much money. I think he's going to get a lot of money. I think similar to the Goran Dragic signing that the Miami Heat made, about 5 years, 90 million max contract. Whether he's worth that right now, I don't know, but it sure looks like that's what he's going to get or very close to that. So he's going to get a big payday this offseason.
And here's where I tend to disagree. Reggie Jackson will be back. That's a no-brainer. But this is my opinion, and take it for what you will. But I believe that former Pistons point guard Brandon Knight is a better player than Reggie Jackson. And Brandon Knight took a 5-year, $70 million deal. That's where I think Reggie Jackson is right now, and I think that's what he should get. 5 years, $70 million, because Reggie Jackson isn't the player Goran Dragic is. Dragic is much better passer. He's a better defender. But Jackson has that potential, and that's where I think Stan Van Gundy's going to say, okay, let's max him. He's probably going to be worth it in the future. So let's just give him the max, make him happy. I mean, he's going to be back in Detroit, but I just feel like Brandon Knight got 5 years, $70 million, and he's the better player right now. So I guess we'll have to see, but I only think he's worth 5 years, $70 million. But if it's gonna take 5 years, $90 million, let's say Reggie Jackson and his agent, get a team to offer him the max and see if Detroit will match it, then I guess we need to match, because I'm not gonna trust a second-year point guard in Spencer Dinwiddie and a guy coming off a torn ACL and Brandon Jennings to run the show for us.
Right, Jackson will be back, but like I said, just a matter of time and how much money. It will be in the range between 70 and 90 million. So it'll be interesting to see what the exact numbers are when it happens.
Okay, so we've talked about how Detroit's roster is pretty much done, besides re-signing Reggie Jackson. Anthony, I want you to give me your final roster prediction. Who doesn't make the team? Is there a shocker? Is there someone getting released? Who's the guy that's probably going to end up down in the D League with the Grand Rapids Drive? Let's hear it.
Point guard, Jennings, Jackson, Dinwiddie. Shooting guard, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jody Meeks, Darren Hilliard, our second-round pick. He'll be in the D League. Small forward, Marcus Morris, Stanley Johnson, Danny Granger, and maybe Quincy Miller. I'm not decided on that. I think it depends on how he performs in the Summer League, whether he's on the roster of the D League team. And power forward, Ilyasova, Tolliver. Then again, Morris can play power forward, and Miller can play power forward. So we have depth at that position. Center, Andre Drummond, and then our new signing, Aaron Baines, which I like a lot. So I think that will be the final roster, 14 or 15 players. Not everybody's going to play. I don't think Dinwiddie will play a lot, unfortunately. And I don't think Miller, if he makes the roster, will play a whole lot. Tolliver will get good minutes. Stanley Johnson should get decent minutes. So that's my final prediction.
Okay, I'm gonna give mine now. I'm gonna say Reggie Jackson, Brandon Jennings, and Spencer Dinwiddie at the 1. At the 2, it's gonna be Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Jody Meeks, and I'm gonna leave that third shooting guard position open as of now. Small forward's gonna be Marcus Morris, Stanley Johnson, Danny Granger. Power forward is gonna be Ersan Ilyasova, Anthony Tolliver, and Quincy Miller. Center's gonna be Andre Drummond and Aaron Baines. So I guess that leaves me with about 2 roster spots. So I'm gonna say Darren Hilliard, and this is gonna be off the wall. I think Detroit. Well, here's the thing: Detroit's either gonna re-sign Joel Anthony or they're gonna get a cheaper guy. Well, I wouldn't say cheaper because Joel Anthony's gonna sign pretty cheap. But here's a guy that I've always liked, and I've watched him in the D League now for a couple months. Well, before it ended, Willie Reed. He's a center. He's big, strong, scoring capabilities, a tenacious rebounder. I really like him. I would love Detroit to go get him. And probably haven't heard of this guy, but I really wish you guys would watch some tape on him because this guy's a monster, and he was actually on the Grand Rapids Drive.
But is he on our summer league team?
No.
Well, then there's a chance we could sign him. But yeah, but I've heard of that guy. I've heard he put up like monster numbers in the D League. Don't know a lot about him, but I don't know if he's an NBA player.
Right, and you don't know about that with a lot of D League prospects. But I definitely think if he's not going to see the floor a lot, you should at least give him a chance. You have Andre Drummond and Aaron Baines. He ain't going to be playing, 20 minutes a game off the bench. If anything, if he even gets in, it'll be like 5, maybe. So I think if Detroit doesn't re-sign Joel Anthony, he's a guy we should look at to come in and get a roster spot.
Right. I don't know if Joel Anthony would be back. I think we should add one more backup center just for insurance. We have a guy named Adonis Thomas, something like that, on our summer league team who's a big man, might make the roster. So I think we'll add one more big man, just don't know who, probably Joel Anthony.
Right, and Joel Anthony is probably the best option. He's a good rim protector, but I'm worried that if Drummond happens to get injured, knock on wood, do we have a guy that's going to be capable to come in and start at the center?
Ilyasova can slide over to center, and we could start Tolliver and Morris. So we have a lot of flexibility. We have a lot of versatility because we have a lot of guys who can play multiple positions.
Yeah, that's I can sense something SBG favors. He wants guys that are versatile enough to play 2 to 3 positions, and basically every guy on this team can besides Andre Drummond.
He could play power forward if needed, but he's pretty much just going to be a center.
Right. That's where he's needed, and that's where he's going to play. Now, we're nearing the end of our show. And one thing on our Twitter panel, on our Twitter feed, is we posted a tweet asking if you guys would rather have on the Pistons roster Brandon Knight and Chris Middleton, who we traded a couple years ago for Brandon Jennings, which led to us having to get Reggie Jackson. So we put out a tweet asking, would you rather have Brandon Knight and Chris Middleton or Brandon Jennings and Reggie Jackson? Anthony, what's your opinion?
I would personally rather have Jackson and Jennings, but I would like to have kept Chris Middleton, whatever that cost would have been, because he's become a very good player in the NBA, just got a huge payday. But I think Jennings has a lot of potential to be a very good point guard if he can bounce back from this injury. Last year, if he didn't go down with the injury, I think he single-handedly could have led us to the playoffs. He was the reason why we had that huge winning streak. I believe in late December, early January, where we won about 9 games in a row, really turned our season around. And if he wouldn't have been hurt, we would have made the playoffs. So I think Jennings has a lot of potential to be a great player in this league. It's just putting it all together. And Reggie Jackson is going to be a great player as well. And they can be one of the best point guard duos in the NBA, if not the best. If you look at their talent and stats and their production, they could be a very solid duo. So I like that. I think Brandon Knight is a very good scorer, but he's not a true point guard. And I think we have two true point guards now in Jackson and Jennings when Knight isn't a true point guard. So I like Jackson and Jennings a lot better.
Now I'm going to disagree with you on this. I like Brandon Knight and Chris Middleton better. I've already said that I think Brandon Knight is a better point guard than Reggie Jackson, and I think uh, Chris Middleton he's one of the most efficient players in the NBA. I forget the exact name of the stat, but it was talking about how he was one of the most efficient players in the NBA last season, and the guy was a second round pick, and he's just developed into a very good player. He's known for hitting late game shots. He can shoot like very few others can. He has good size for the two. He's at 6'7", plays defense. He's just an all-around good player, and his size. If Detroit had Brandon Knight and Chris Middleton along with the team we have now, and not Brandon Jennings and Reggie Jackson, I think we'd all be saying Detroit was heading to the playoffs. Would you agree with that?
That's tough because I don't know how Brandon Knight would play in Stan Van Gundy's system. He's not the best in the pick and roll. He's solid, but I think Jennings and Jackson are better at running the pick and roll. That's huge in SVG's offense. And Knight's just not a true point guard, like I said. But if you throw Chris Middleton into that, we would have been so much of a better team with perimeter defense and shooting. With Chris Middleton, we would have been much better. So I don't think we should or needed to have included him in that trade for Jennings. But I think it will all work out, and the Pistons will be back in the playoffs this season because of Jennings and Jackson.
Yeah, here's the thing I dislike most about that Pistons and Milwaukee Bucks trade a couple of years ago is Detroit gave up a very promising young center in Slava Kravtsov. Would you agree with that?
I wouldn't say he was promising, but he had potential. He was young. He was a big guy, could rebound. He's your typical backup 7-foot stiff European NBA center like Kyle Fisenko. He's just like that. He's not gonna be anything special, not gonna be a solid backup, but he's a guy that would provide depth, could maybe step into a backup role, but if you look at what happened, didn't play in Phoenix, got cut right away. Think he's back in Europe now, so I wouldn't say he was promising, but he could have been a decent third string, depth guy.
Yeah, I was definitely just kidding on that part.
Yeah, I
just
hope
love
so.
saying his name.
Yeah.
Slava Kravtsov. That's a unique name.
Yeah, he was a character.
All right, well, guys, that's gonna wrap it up for us here today at Pistons Nation. We'll be back with our weekly show next week, as always, and maybe we'll do a free agency recap in the near future. We'll talk about the Pistons' final roster, and make sure to check out our site, PistonsNation.net. We give you the fastest coverage of the Pistons,
the best coverage, the best analysis, and make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram. Twitter is Piston_Nation. Instagram is Pistons_Nation. Make sure you follow our social media, and please check out the website. We have great analysis, and we got daily articles almost every day. PistonsNation.net. Please check it out. Thanks for listening, everyone.